FASA is a mod for Kerbal Space Program that adds Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft and launch vehicles to KSP. This allows near replication of not only real missions, but also proposed alternatives and fantasy missions as well. The spacecraft include Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, CSM, and LEM, but also includes a Gemini-based lunar lander, as well as other related spacecraft. The launch vehicles include the Redstone and Atlas for Mercury, the Titan II and Titan III for Gemini, as well as Saturn 1B, Saturn V, and Nova for Apollo. Like its real-life counterpart, this Mercury Redstone is only suborbital, but it does work quite well and is an excellent simulation of the real thing. The Mercury Atlas works quite well at putting the Mercury spacecraft into orbit. However, there is a staging issue with the first stage boosters, since you actually have to click on them to jettison, and sometimes it can cause a minor control issue. The Gemini Titan II works quite well at placing the Gemini spacecraft into orbit. It is recommended, though, to keep the throttle down to around 70-75%. The Gemini spacecraft itself looks pretty good in orbit and does a pretty good job of replicating the Gemini spacecraft deorbit and reentry. It also includes a great internal view in which you can actually look out the Gemini's forward windows. The Gemini Titan III with a Centaur upper stage is a pretty good reproduction of what would have been a possible Gemini launch vehicle to the moon. And it does a pretty good job of sending a Gemini spacecraft on a free return trajectory to and from Mon. Here is an Apollo Saturn 1B. This one also flies quite well, delivering the Apollo spacecraft into orbit. However, it is best to keep the throttle to 70-75%. This provides the most realistic flight. Here is the Apollo Saturn V moon rocket. Once again, this one flies quite well, particularly if you keep the throttle to the 70-75% range. One little thing to remember, though, is to remove the access arm on the gantry before launching. This is the Apollo Nova launch vehicle. It was originally designed for a direct return moon mission. And so if you put actual flight, Apollo command and service module, and LEM on top of it, this booster will actually take this Apollo spacecraft to Dune, into Kerbal Space Program, with enough fuel to get back. This rocket flies pretty good, and once again, it is best to keep the throttling to the 70-75% range. While this mod allows you to run real-life missions, it also allows fantasy missions as well. Basically, if you can imagine a mission using Mercury to Apollo hardware, you can play it out. One downside is that with Majeb, you do have to play around with the settings to get the rocket to fly to orbit without overheating. The other downside is that only the Apollo CM has a heat shield, so you may want to turn down the reentry heating when setting up your game or experiment with other heat shields. Overall, this is a good mod, but it has minor issues. I give FASA a 9 out of 10.